Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and on this episode we're doing It Came From the Network. The topic of this It Came From the Network, WWF Wrestlemania XV. This comes to us as a suggestion from our friend Ryan Hadley. Since we are on the road to WrestleMania these next couple weeks, I am going to do WrestleMania themed It Came From the Networks. With that being said, if you haven't seen any of my videos before, I rate everything on a 1 to 5 scale. 1 is the worst, 5 is the best. Let's jump right into this. We start off with Boyz II Men singing America the Beautiful. Very fitting since they are in Philadelphia. Boyz II Men are from Philadelphia, one of the biggest acts of this time period, and definitely one of the biggest singing acts to ever come out of the city of Philadelphia. Just an awesome opening. That leads us to probably one of the most iconic video segments or video openings of the era and maybe of all time in pro wrestling, and I could be just a bit biased, but we get a classic hype video for WrestleMania showing the history, the feuds involved in this WrestleMania, being narrated by Freddie Blassie. And this is why I said I might be a little bit biased. When I was a kid, my mom always used to tell me my grandmother, her mother, was Freddie Blassie's cousin. Now, I've never met Freddie Blassie. I don't know how accurate it is, but I've always had a tie to him because of that. And because of that, maybe I'm more inclined to dig this video than most people are. I like to think it's one of the best things they ever done. This and the Kid Rock Lonely Road of Faith video they did a couple years later when there was a threat to the WCW killing WWE during the invasion. One of the only good things to come out of that angle. I thought this was an awesome opening. That brings us right into our first match of the evening. For the Hardcore Championship, a 3-way match. We got Hardcore Holly against Al Snow and Billy Gunn. This was an okay match. Out of the major companies at the time, obviously ECW was doing the hardcore wrestling the best, but WWE at least had entertaining hardcore matches. This was a good match. I don't know if I feel like it was a WrestleMania quality match. It felt like this would feel more on place on SmackDown or Raw. Holly does pick up the win on this. I'm going to give this one a 3. Like I said, it was a good match. I just don't feel like it had the gravitas to be a WrestleMania match. That's followed up with our Tag Team Championship match. Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett being led to the ring by Deborah, defending their tag championships against D'Lo Brown and Test. And they were selected by winning a Battle Royal, being the last 2 people in a Battle Royal that happened earlier in the night on Heat. And that's kind of weird that was a stipulation for a WrestleMania. I kind of wish that the network, or Peacock as it is now, had as part of the WrestleManias the pre-shows, the ones that even before they had Heat, when they had them on cable, you would have the buy-in kind of thing where for a half hour you got to see one dark match or preliminary match. I wish they had those as part of the WrestleMania season. Maybe they put WrestleMania and the Heat that led into it, or WrestleMania and the buy-in. It's a little quip. They have the content. They have Heat up on Peacock. I don't know if they have all of Heat. I haven't watched any of the episodes of it. But I think it would just be cool to have that tied into where it led into. The match itself, this again was another good match, not a great match. Ivory is with D'Lo Brown. She's in a feud with PMS. They come out during the match to distract. The tensions between D'Lo and Test lead them to not working so well as a team. Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett pick up the win here. I'm giving this one a 3 again. I thought it was good. Again, not great. Next up, we get probably one of the most infamous matches in WWE history. We get the winner of the Brawl for All, Bart Gun, in a Brawl for All style match against Butterbean. If you're not familiar with Butterbean in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, was a 350-pound, 400-pound boxer who boxed as a super heavyweight, and his main thing was that he was a knockout artist. He knocked out everybody he would get in the ring with. So realistically, even though Bart Gun pretty much ran through the Brawl for All, he was no real contest for a guy who was a professional boxer with a career of knocking people out rather quickly. This was pretty much a joke. This was a way to kill a man's career in less than 2 minutes because Butterbean just destroyed him, knocked him out cold, took away any credibility that Bart Gun may have earned by winning the Brawl for All. This was absolutely terrible. Vinny Pazienza, the boxer, the Tasmanian Devil, was a referee during this. The biggest thing was when they announced the judges and Gorilla Monsoon was announced. He got the biggest pop of almost anyone during the night. Gorilla is an absolute legend. This was terrible. Butterbean picks up the win. I'm not even going to give it a 1. I'm giving it a 0. It was terrible. Afterwards, we see the San Diego Chicken doing a little back and forth with Pazienza. A little bit of entertainment added onto what was something terrible during this. I don't mind having a boxing match on a wrestling show. Sometimes it works. Most of the time it doesn't. It just felt like there was no chance for Bart Gun. Now from that, our next match is Mankind versus The Big Show, who was being called Big Show Paul White at the time, and the winner of this would get to be the referee in the main event. Big Show was part of the corporation with Vince McMahon at the time. This was a decent match again. All the way to this point, and even after this, I didn't feel like any of these matches were WrestleMania matches. They felt like they could all have easily been on Heat. They could have been on Raw. Mankind, Mick Foley, is my favorite wrestler of all time, so it's not any knock on anyone in these matches. A lot of these talents I really like. Owen Hart, I like Jeff Jarrett, D'Lo Brown, Test, Billy Gunn, Al Snow. All of these guys I think are fantastic. These just felt like normal matches to me, like nothing special. Mankind picks up the win by disqualification, thus getting a chance. Afterwards, we see Big Show and Vince McMahon arguing. Big Show makes his first of what'll be 5,743 heel face turns in the WWE. For that, I'm giving this match a 3. Again, I just didn't feel like it felt anything special to be a WrestleMania match. The other thing is, we'll start to see a little bit of a trend here, as there's a lot of questionable finishes to the matches. I know it's part of the era, but it doesn't make it any better. Just my opinion. Next up, we get a fatal 4-way for the Intercontinental Championship. The Road Dogg is defending against Goldust, who has the Blue Meanie and Ryan Shamrock with him, Ken Shamrock, and Val Venus. This was not good. This was a train wreck. It didn't feel like any of the 4 guys ever got on the same page. There was a lot of sloppiness to it. And again, these are 4 wrestlers I like. It's not the wrestlers. This match just never really felt like it got off the ground. Eventually, the Road Dogg does pick up the win. I'm going to give this one a 2. Like I said, this one, it just, other than the Brawl for All, this is probably one of my least favorite matches on the show. One of the 3 least favorite, and I'll get to the other one a little bit later. But this just, I don't know. I guess maybe I had higher expectations with the 4 names involved, and remembering back, maybe I remember it better than it was, but it just didn't feel like a great match in my opinion. Now going from that, our next match, we have Kane, who was second in by China, who had previously split off from Triple H. Before we get in the match, we see the San Diego Chicken attack Kane, which leads us to finding out that the San Diego Chicken is actually Pete Rose. For the second year in a row, Pete Rose eats a tombstone. Then we go right into the match with Kane and Triple H. This was a good match. Again, I still haven't got to the point on this show where I feel like any of these could have been on any other pay-per-view. This could have been Armageddon. I feel like a broken record saying this, again, 2 wrestlers I like. We see the end come where Chyna openly cheats and turns on Kane to join Triple H. I thought this was a good match, a little bit hindered by the end. I'm giving this one a 3 again. Chyna causes a DQ for Kane to get the win. Next up, we see in the back Vince McMahon, who talks about having Paul White arrested, the Big Show, and that he's going to be the referee in the match later on. Then we get to see a cool little thing that I actually forgot. Big Punisher, Big Pun, the rapper, who unfortunately shortly after this, maybe a year or 2 after, passed away rather young, was shown in the crowd. Kind of a neat little thing seeing that point in time, especially knowing the potential that he had to become a bigger star than he even was. Still was kind of awesome seeing him there. That leads us into another match, and this one's for the Women's Championship. We have Sable defending against Tori, and not Tori Wilson, a different Tori. If you remember, there was a Tori before Tori Wilson in WWE. All I could say for the match is thank God for the Brawl for All match, because this is terrible. This was really bad. Neither of these 2 women had the wrestling skill to put on anything that resembled a decent match. I hate to discredit people's talents. I hate to discredit people that are trying. Sable absolutely is a star. I cannot deny that. But her talent as a wrestler is very bad. This was a terrible match. Eventually, Sable picks up the win when Nicole Bass comes in and kind of helps her out, thus debuting Nicole Bass. I'm going to give this one a 1. I thought it was really bad. Other than the Brawl for All, probably my least favorite match on the show. And when I was saying about the Fatal 4-Way, I almost forgot that this match was here. That's why I had to dial it back in a bit. Just a terrible match. It's so great to see that now, when you watch WWE now, chances are that the Women's Championship match is going to be one of the better matches on the show. And it could have been at this time. There were very talented women wrestlers that were either with the company or could have been with the company if they signed them. So, again, it's just a time capsule of how bad and how poorly women's wrestling was treated at the time and who the big stars of women's wrestling were. I don't think either of these two women would crack any roster on a televised wrestling show nowadays, other than to maybe be a manager. Other than that, I don't think they'd ever make it into the ring. Now that is followed up with Shane McMahon going up against XPac. This is where it starts to pick up for me. This is one of the matches that I really got into. We see a lot of the same problems with the Attitude Era. There's a lot of outside interference. The Mean Street Posse's ringside. The Stooges try to attack X-Pac on his way to the ring. At the end, Triple H and Chyna come down, which before the match they had a whole interview with all of the reformed DX with Chyna being back in the fray. Triple H and Chyna come down. They turn on X-Pac, which, again, like I said, there's a lot of turns and there's a lot of swerves. It was a trope of the era, and it kind of is one of those things that makes the Attitude Era not hold up as well as it should for the revolutionary stuff that was being done. For every Stone Cold stunning Vince McMahon for the first time, there are 10 incidences like this where someone turns 2 times in the same show. Ultimately, that took a little bit from the match. The Outlaws and Kane came out afterwards, but the match itself was pretty good. Shane McMahon does pick up the win on this. I have to take a little bit off because of all the outside curricular, but I did enjoy it, and it did feel like it belonged on a WrestleMania card. I'm giving this one a 3. Next up, we have another infamous match, and I think that my take on this match is going to be different than a lot of people's is. We have the Big Boss Man versus the Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell match. I believe at the time this was only the 3rd Hell in a Cell match, and we're definitely coming off of what is widely regarded the best Hell in a Cell match with Undertaker and Mankind. I really enjoyed this match. I thought this was good. I will talk about the ending here in a bit, but the psychology in this and the way that this was worked, Big Boss Man isn't given enough credit for how great he really was. Undertaker, everybody knows how great he is and how great he was as a wrestler. I rather enjoyed this match. Ultimately, Undertaker does pick up the win here. Afterwards, we see the Brood come down on zip wire and lower a noose into the ring. And this is where everybody kind of goes off the rails on this, that no longer agree with it or kind of lose their interest in it. Undertaker hangs the Boss Man from the noose, which is totally either unbelievable or he just murdered a man. There's only 2 ways you can look at that, which a lot of people will give this negatives because of that. I don't personally. I think they were just trying to throw anything out there. Undertaker was doing a lot of crazy stuff at the time, crucifying people to his symbol, stuff like that. There was the whole Ministry of Darkness era. Overall, I thought this was highly enjoyable. I'm going to give this one a 4. And finally, that leads us to our main event of the show, the match I was most looking forward to. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock. It's said that Mick Foley can't be the referee because he was injured earlier. We get Vince McMahon coming out announcing he's going to be the referee, which then brings out Commissioner Shawn Michaels, who tells Vince that only the commissioner could decide who the referee is, and he just brings out a normal ref, and they go on to the match. This is Stone Cold and The Rock. I mean, the electricity in the crowd. 2 of the great wrestlers of the era. 2 of the great personalities in the history of wrestling. 2 of the biggest stars wrestling has ever produced in the ring, both at the peak of their popularity. I don't think you're ever going to see anything like this ever again. This would have been like seeing Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan in 1988 go against each other. There's really no comparison to how great and how dynamic these two wrestlers were at the time and how important in the wrestling history they are, both even to this day. This was an absolutely fantastic match. I loved every part of it. Ultimately, there's shenanigans. Vince gets involved. The ref gets knocked out, which brings us out Mankind. He actually gets to be the referee in the match. Austin eventually defies all the odds, picks up the win. I'm giving this one a 5. It is my favorite show on the card. If you look at it at a pure work rate, you're probably not going to rate it as high. But if you look at it on as how much you enjoyed it, I think you'll be right there with me. And that's how I rate my things. I don't look at work rate. I don't look at gimmick or whatever it may be. How much do I enjoy the specific match? And to me, you can't get much better than Stone Cold and The Rock with Vince McMahon, Shawn Michaels, and Mick Foley getting involved. 5 of the biggest names of the era all involved in one match. How can you go wrong? Overall, I thought this was a pretty underwhelming WrestleMania. It's not one of the worst. I'd probably put it right there in the middle of the road area for WrestleManias. WrestleMania 9 comes right to my head as something that's infinitely worse than this. WrestleMania 2, I would say, is worse than this. And there's probably some others that aren't sticking out as much that are worse than this or even just as bad. Overall, I'm going to give this show a 3. There is some good here, but I would honestly say you could skip most of this for the most part. I would highly recommend watching that main event. But there's nothing groundbreaking or revolutionary here. No match that really stands out as a match you need to go back and watch other than the main event. Maybe the Hell in a Cell. I would put that right up there. Maybe that's one that you would go back and watch, especially if you're a big Boss Man fan. Again, I think it's a pretty middle-of-the-road WrestleMania. Just my opinion on that. If you made it all the way to the end, let's smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. If you made it to the end of this video, let me know what you think. What is the worst WrestleMania in your opinion? Is it this one? Is it a different one? Let me know what you think. Hit me down here in the comments. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another It Came From the Network.